Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here with us at Sunday service. My name is Naya Swami Anandi. This is Naya Swami Bharat. We want to especially welcome all of you who are here for the first time and are watching us on the internet. And also we have a very special group of guests today. Our family from India is here, and 12 pilgrims, and we're so happy to have them here. Thank you. So I'll read this morning from Rays of the One Light, which are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita written by Swami Ananda. This week's reading is called The Eternal Now. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. When will I find God? Many devotees have asked this question. Because worldly goals require time, usually, for their fulfillment, we imagine time to be a factor on the spiritual path. And so it is, but only because we think it is. God is as much with us now as he will ever be. It is not he who needs to come to us. We need to come to him. And that process of coming is a matter of transforming our self-perception. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 4, Jesus Christ says, Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes, and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. There is a practical teaching in these words, apart from their statement that we have God already, and have only to realize that truth. Jesus is saying, lift up your eyes and look. To hold the eyes uplifted is the best position for meditation, for the seat of superconsciousness lies at a point midway between the eyebrows, in the frontal lobe of the brain just behind that point. This point is known also as the Christ Center. By lifting up your eyes and concentrating there, you will find it easier to enter a state of ecstasy. That is why saints in every religion have often been observed during states of deep inner communion with their eyes uplifted, focused on the inner light, white, as Jesus said, already to harvest. The Bhagavad Gita goes further into this meditative teaching. In the 6th chapter, it states, holding the spine firm, the neck and head erect and motionless, let the yogi focus his eyes at the starting point of the nose, the point between the eyebrows. Let not his gaze roam elsewhere. In meditation, tell yourself, I have him already. I am alive forever in the divine light. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om.
Good morning. So I'd like to read from Whispers from Eternity, and they're mystical poems by Paramahansa Yogananda. Flowers, cloud-scattered skies, and all beautiful blossoming scenery, all these only suggest thy divinity. I enjoy them. I revel in them. But then they remind me of thee. In that remembrance, these mere though glorious messengers vanish, and the beauty of my own beloved infinity enthralls me. As Ananda was reading this week's reading, the thought came to me that most of people in society, they either live in the eternal past or the eternal future, but not the eternal now. There's a special forces expert that would train people on survival techniques. And he said that all the people that knew how to camp, people knew all the edible plants and all the things about nature, there wasn't really an advantage. He said, give me positive people that don't know anything, and I'll guarantee you that they'll come out of a survival situation much better than people with outward knowledge. And I was thinking about the carping spirit. The carping spirit is something that's very popular today. And it's simply just a non-acceptance of what is. And there was a period in my life where I was going through some real challenges, and they seemed to be continuous for a while. And first I want to read a sentence that Swami wrote about the eternal now before I continue the story, because I just came across this 5 minutes before I left the house, so I don't have it memorized. But he said, the eternal now is sweetness absolute, full to overflowing with the bliss of God. And during this challenging time, I had this strong thought of this image in meditation, and it was the thought of Divine Mother. Of course, Divine Mother is God's presence in this world, and the creative aspect of the divine. And I saw her standing there, and with just this beatific smile on her face, just looking at me. And she was holding in her hands my karma that was especially made for me. And you know, God is beyond vibratory creation, and He wants us to be beyond vibratory creation too. In the Bible it says we'll have dominion over the whole earth. It doesn't mean that we become a housing developer, or but it means that we're free of the material plane, the astral plane, and that we're one with God. And so so I knew this karma was for me to free me. And I could tell by the love of Divine Mother, that's exactly what it was. And she just held it out to me with just this beautiful smile. And of course, I had to take that karma, and I wanted to take that karma. And so I reached out and took that karma, and then as I brought it to my heart and I fully accepted it, I felt energy flowing upwards, up through my spine. And Paramahansa Yogananda, he said that the quickest way to overcome karma and the most happy way to overcome karma was to accept it cheerfully and calmly and not add any more vibration to it, but to just, in Patanjali it talks about it's only through stillness that we see through delusion, because then everything comes to rest. And so more and more, that isn't that the secret? Is just finding that still center. Some years ago, Nayaswami Jyotish and I, we were talking about the spiritual life and some things that we found inspiring. And this is many years ago, it could be 35 years ago. But Jyotish said that I'm working on getting rid of resistances. And you don't think of Jyotish, those that know him, as someone with resistances. So I think he was very successful. But it's that rejection. And thinking of the eternal now is right now. The eternal now is every episode that comes into our life. And we have the opportunity, because everything comes from God. Swami and Ananda and the material success, he said that everything that comes to us is just an instrument for our karma to come to us so we can become free. So everything that comes, as I was writing in the old book, I realized, Om is the creative force in life that makes everything. And Om has made a special world for each one of us, instant to instant. And we can accept that world and that divine gift, or we can reject it. And it really just depends on us. And the more that we fully accept it, the more quickly we understand and we move through our karma, and the freer we become. Well, getting back to the carping spirit, there's just that tendency to just not accept what is, and to always weigh everything, compare everything. And I heard this wonderful story of a group of children. Of course, Christ said, bring the children here. They're the ones coming quickly to heaven because of their innocence. Well, there's a group of 10-year-old children, and they were playing basketball. And they were having a great time playing basketball. And it became halftime, and the coach waved them all over to the bench. And because the children knew that the score was very important to the parents, they said, "What's the score? What's the score?" And so the father that was keeping score for the team said, "Well, it's 30-8. And then the children asked, "Who's ahead? Who's ahead?" Because they hadn't been keeping score at all. They were just playing. They were just immersed in the experience. And they weren't counting and measuring. And who is the one that wants to know the score? Who is the one that wants to compare oneself with other people? It's the ego, isn't it? Ego that's trying to, it's desperate, it's just grasping to try to pump itself up. And so it looks for it any way that it can. But that sweet innocence of just playing, we get into a flow with life where we're just really a part of life, and we feel the underlying joy of life with that kind of spirit where there's not a separation. Paramahansa Yogananda said that we use only 5% of our concentration. Maybe he wasn't talking about Kriya Yogis. I hope he wasn't. But when I was writing one of my nature books, I thought, well, gee, then that means that our experience of nature is only 1/20th of what's possible. And I was in this really particular beautiful area that was just this oasis, and it was like sort of desert all around, and it was just a lush paradise. And I was just thinking that, gosh, this is so beautiful, and then it's just gone. When my thoughts would go in the past or the future, it would just completely vanish. And I was thinking, of course, with God, it's the same way. Sri Yukteswar, when somebody doubted God, he challenged the person, didn't he, to observe your thoughts for a day, I think it was a day, and you'll see why God is not present in your life. I was recently in South Korea, and before that Taiwan, and there was an exercise that I was doing with the group just to emphasize that. And this was in a garden forest area in South Korea, and it was a reflective pool just about 2 feet deep, and it had 120 people around. And I talked about the bottom of the pool, the water is very, very still and unmoving in that spirit. But then the surface is disturbed every once in a while by a dragonfly, or mayfly, or a leaf falling, or the wind ruffling the surface. But that's all exterior to the lake itself. And it was kind of a perfect setting because they were around this reflective pool, 120 people. Then there was a little raised pagoda, and I had 6 stones in my hands. And I was explaining about how a sage had said, whenever you come to a still body of water, absorb that stillness and feel the calmness in your soul. But then every time you find your mind hijacked, you throw a stone into the water, and it causes a commotion. And isn't this what happens when we really emphasize our own ego, things that we want as opposed to what the universe wants? And it created a splash, but then you let these little circles just fade away, and you come back to the present moment. Just to emphasize the importance of that sense of stillness, of coming back home. And there was a Zen monk attending. He was just jumping up and down. I'm going to use this in my classes. But we're sometimes the unwillingness monster. I think Haridas, who I think is in the audience, I think he coined the term the unwillingness monster, and that means that we're resisting what life is bringing to us. And it's a great concept because we realize that we're really caught, and that we're really not able to really receive the karma, the life experiences that come to us to free us. And in 1981, I had the opportunity to go lecture for 5 weeks in England. And then I flew to the Ananda Palo Alto house, which was in Atherton at the time, overnight. Then I flew straight on to Australia, where I had another month of lectures. I don't know how that schedule happened, but it did. And in Australia, I did 19 all-day workshops, and then evening lectures and TV appearances. And they were very receptive, but I remember after, maybe 15 all-day workshops, we were driving a long way to the next place where I was going to do an all-day program. And my host, who was a wonderful man, just said, guess what, this university, they want to have us lecture there tonight. And it was a 7-hour drive, and I must admit, I was a little more than unwilling, and I couldn't face him, and I just looked out the passenger window. And I thought, why couldn't they just record my voice and play it? This was before all this. I know that they recorded voices in 1981, but it wasn't as easy as now, I think. And I just sort of thought that for a while, but then we arrived at the university, and I thought, well, this is going to be a bad experience for you, Bharat, and a bad experience for the audience unless you get your act together. And it wasn't that bad, but I just knew that, as the reading said, when we're in matter consciousness, time takes a long time. Things just need to happen, like the fields all of a sudden became ripe, and we know where we can go, don't we? We just lift our energy up through the spine to the spiritual eye. And it's just transformative. We've all experienced it. And feel the presence of God. And so I had about 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and I went out in a little garden and I prayed, and I said, I need help, lots of help, and I need your joy and enthusiasm if I'm going to do this today. And so I walked into the lecture, and I felt so much joy that I lectured over an hour than I was supposed to. But the whole concept of flow learning, which is something that we use at our schools, and it's not I bet you there's over 100,000 educators that use this form of education. That all came to me that night just because I was willing. And when God knows we're willing, that's when the blessings really flow to us, doesn't it? And so more and more, it's like, as Swami has said, if we take care of the present moment and we fully receive it and we're fully immersed in it, there's so many blessings in that moment. And to just take advantage. And of course, we need to be still in order to fully enter into the present moment or approach the present moment. There's no harm that can come to us when we're in the stillness of God. Maybe things will happen to us, but it's nullified, it's reduced, or we just pay off karma quickly. I have a friend, I was visiting with him on a Sunday morning, and he's the superintendent of a small school district in Pennsylvania. And he was telling me a story that just happened to him just a few days ago. He said, I was sitting in the school office, and I'd had to fire or suspend the wrestling coach who was a champion, state champion wrestler. I guess wrestling is pretty big in Pennsylvania. And he had a lot of relatives in the town, and in this car coming, I saw about 4 or 5 big 200-pound guys, there were 2 cars filled with good old boys, come racing up to him at the office, and he quickly called his daughter and said, call school security right now. And then he hung up the phone, and he had just about 37 seconds before they landed. And so he did meditate, and he just sat, and he lifted his eyes up, as the reading said, and he became very calm. And as calm as you could be with these guys getting out of the car. They rushed into the building, and they tried to intimidate him. That's how they were used to getting their way. And they were yelling at him and everything, and he was sitting there calmly behind the desk. And they were shouting, why did you do this? This is an embarrassment to the family. And then on and on and on and on. And he just stayed centered in his spine. And they saw that they weren't getting to him. And they became a little bit quiet, and then he had a chance to speak. And it was just, the coach was just verbally abusing the students, and just couldn't allow it anymore. And he explained that it was for the students' sake. And they listened, and they said they would talk to their, I guess most of them, it was their nephew. And everything resolved itself. And Swami Kriyananda has said that when we're centered in the spine, when we're centered in the eternal now, outer events adjust to our inner control. Because there's so much more magnetism, because the life force is gathered, isn't it, in the deep, deep spine. And so everything on the surface just adjusts to it. And nothing can touch us. There's a beautiful story about one of our members in Portland, Mari. She was at her local bank depositing or taking money out of her bank, and there was a robbery, and she was right next to a window or two right where she was. And it was kind of an energetic robbery, you could say. And Mari, being a yogi, she was a little kind of perturbed by her reaction, because she was really frightened by the event. And Master had said we should stand unshaken among breaking worlds. But when we're in a situation like this, we really see where we are, and it would probably be all of our response if there was a Robbie next to us. But she was still, there was disappointment on her part. And so for the next 2 years, she just thought of Om. And you know, in Om is Divine Mother. It's the creative aspect of God. And Om is the pristine vibration from pure, unmoving spirit. God moved the water, he created vibration. But it's called a pristine vibration because it's God's presence in this world, and it's beyond duality between pain and health and joy and sorrow. And so it's just Om is God, as the scriptures say. And in Om, there's no opposite or no opposition. It's just, Om is the melody of love. 2 weeks had gone, or 2 years had gone by, and Mari had kept thinking of Om. If there was an harmonious situation, whether in herself or around her, she would just silently chant Om. She would listen for the inner sounds as well as she could, and just focused on it. Well, 2 years, almost to the exact day, she was also at her bank, same branch, and there was another robbery, which was even more violent, and somebody was thrown to the ground, and Mari was very calm. She'd been focusing on Om. And there was just a lot of chaos, and there was a woman that was freaking out, just like Mari had the time before, 2 years before. And so Mari just grabbed her hand and said, let's get away from the commotion, let's help calm things down. And so she took her hand, and she just sort of, on the floor, they sort of scooted out of the way, because I think they were right next to the gunman. And it was just a testament that she, you know, Swami said that, you know, this world is a vibratory world, and the secret is to follow that movement, which will eventually lead us to absolute stillness. And we come to the pristine vibration of Om, and then we go beyond Om to the Christ consciousness. What is the Christ consciousness? It's the reflected spirit of God at the center of every vibrating atom in the universe. And this is the consciousness of a Christ. And then you go into pure spirit. And that may seem like that's far away, but remember the eternal now. But Swami has said that in every pause in Hong Sa lies the Christ consciousness. All we have to do is go deeper into it. And we have so many things that help bring us there. Love brings us there because we're anchored in the spine. And we don't go outside of the spine, but we're centered very deeply. I had an experience of, well, Master said that when you are in the present moment, you feel God as joy. And I was up on Grouse Ridge, an area that many of us know. It's not too far from Ananda. And it was June, and it was covered with snow. And I'd taken 2 Englishmen up on top and left my map with them. And I went down, but everything looked different in the snow. So I took a wrong ridge, and it was about 7,000 feet or so. And it was late, just a few, maybe an hour of light left. And as I was going through the snow, I realized that I had gone the wrong way and I couldn't get back to my car. And so I knew that I didn't want to sleep in the snow. I didn't have a sleeping bag or anything. So I had to get off the mountain as quick as I could. I knew that by morning I'd find my way, because there was the freeway. As Daniel Boone said when he was asked, have you ever been lost? And he said, no. I've been might bewildered for a week or two, but but he always knew which way the Mississippi was. Well, the Highway 80 was by the next day I would have reached Highway 80, so there was no problem, but it would have been an uncomfortable night in the snow. So I energetically walked, but I walked with God, and I just thought of God and talked with God, and I got out of the snow, and that was good, and wouldn't be as cold. And but I found that there was still, in the twilight, I could still keep going, but I started feeling this overwhelming sense of peace and joy in my heart, and that just became everything to me. And then I reached this lake, and there were some fishermen way out in the lake, but I didn't want to call to them because I would have taken away from the great sense of joy and peace that I felt in my heart. That was more important, as I said, than anything. So I didn't say anything at all. And I kept kind of walking, chose one way to go around the lake. And finally I came to this little cove, and there was a man fishing there, and it was just maybe 30 feet across the cove. And I said, "What lake is this?" And he kind of looked at me puzzled because it was falling light. And he said, "Well, it's Lake Spalding." And I'd never seen it from the backside. And I said, "Oh, thank you." And then I kept walking around the cove. By this time it was pitch black, and I was having to shuffle with my feet. And I got onto a road, and I was just shuffling. And all of a sudden I heard out of the darkness of the night the same fisherman saying, "Why didn't you know the name of the lake?" And I said, "Oh, well, I left my car up the road a few miles. It was actually 8 miles and maybe 2,000 feet higher. But it was all in God's hands. I just wasn't going to, I just felt so much joy, I didn't want it to end. If I got a ride, that meant that night would have ended sooner. So I didn't say anything. And and so he would talk to his friends, and they said, "Well, you should come and drive up there, but it's a really rough road." And so I was in the back seat with the fishermen, and the two were in the front, and the driver didn't want to drive up there. And I was hoping that, oh good, the night would last longer, and it's just 8 miles uphill in total darkness. I don't have a flashlight, and but this is just the night's going to last longer, and this joy I feel. I mean, I don't have this sense of joy with me all the time. All of us will have it all the time at some point. But finally, the first fisherman shamed the driver into driving me up so that I was able to get the car. But Swami has talked about contentment as being the greatest virtue, hasn't he? And that's because we aren't resisting life. We're just fully embracing it. And as I said earlier, everything that comes to us is karma just given to us by Divine Mother for our freedom. And then we don't create so much waves of commotion. And then we can live more and more in the center of God. I'd like to read something that it was either Swami or Master wrote. I'm sorry, I don't know. But he said, "In God no time exists. There is only now. The illusion of space and time is produced by movement of thought, restless. Without movement, absolute consciousness alone would remain." And so remember that admonition in the Bible, "Be still and know that I am God." We have so many wonderful techniques to practice to bring us to that stillness. We have so many dear souls and Guru Bhais that remind us of God and divine love that help bring us there. We have an incredible, fortunate life, don't we? To just more and more come to a point of rest in God and Guru. Bless us all.
Home is our green hill, home is our wind, blowing betrayal. the end of the fray. Home is my heart's land, home's where I am. Nothing can dim the light of my soul. Home is forever, home is today.